Hey everyone, welcome to the Carlson Cards podcast. Very fun episode here today. I'm recording this intro outside because it's beautiful. I don't have my setup ready, but I'm going to record this intro anyway. Just got done recording with my friend Zan. This is a very fun episode. We talk 90s cards, specifically mostly football and baseball, and we dove into some of the dilemmas with a lot of the fake precious metal gems that have been popping up. So Zan kind of goes over the kind of how-tos and what to look for on these copies of cards that keep popping up and throws a ton of good tips in along the way. Hope you enjoy this episode and be sure to share with a friend if you haven't already. Let's kick it over to the conversation. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 16 of the Carlson Cards podcast. I'm joined today by an awesome 90s collector that I've gotten to know through Instagram. His name is Zan. He goes by @Zanu23_sportscard on Instagram. A really great collector who has recently been posting a lot about some fake precious metal gems for football that have been floating around. You know, I wanted to get Zan on anyway to just talk about his collection, but I feel like this is a great opportunity to talk about some of these rare 90s sets and some of the dilemmas that come into play when there's a lot of value involved and people will make fake copies of these cards. So this will be a very fun conversation, hopefully very informative for all of you. And obviously, Zan, how are you doing? And thanks for hopping on here.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me on. I only had to blackmail your whole family to get on your show, but it was worth it. No, but thank you. Yeah, I'm excited to be on with you. It's been good getting to know you over the past couple months. I had listened to you on Brett's show for a while there, and before I messaged you. But yeah, it's been nice getting to know somebody with like different collecting interests than mine. And one of these days, we're gonna force you into the '90s realm. I think it's inevitable.
Yeah. I'm like slowly creeping back. It's like I have I like 99 Finest now. Now I like 98 Atomic Refractors. What's next? I don't know. Maybe there's a 97 set I'll be all over. It's definitely not 24 karat. Too expensive for me, but maybe another one.
As a Peyton guy, you got to get into the rookies, although the rookies are quite pricey, so I can understand that.
Yeah. I did pick up my first Atomic, so it's the best performers in a 9.5. Excited about that one, but that is the first. I've had a Topps Chrome Refractor, but I had to trade that one at the National. So this is my current only rookie right now is that Atomic Refractor. But it's fun. I like those.
The Woodson Atomic, right?
Correct. Rookie. Yeah, and a Randy Moss. So I have one for each of them, but I still need, right, there's like a base and then there's the Performers insert. Right. So I need the opposite for each of them, which is kind of funny. But hopefully we'll get there eventually. So I was going to start here, Zan. I'd love to kind of go over this question that you actually posed me on Instagram. I don't even know how this came up. Maybe you're just a creative, spontaneous dude.
Maybe.
But I got a message from Zan here that said, aliens have invaded Earth. They have studied us in our version of football. They have challenged us to one game for the fate of mankind. Kind of, this reminds me of, what's the Michael Jordan? What's the movie?
Space Jam.
Space Jam. Yeah, Space Jam football. So the other part here was that we do not have any background on the alien schemes, plays, etc. So we must field a team to save the planet. So I think you and I are going to draft here for the heck of it. Yeah. A quarterback, a running back, a wide receiver, a tight end, and a defense. And we got to figure out what this roster is going to be for each of us.
Yeah, we got to figure it out. So the way I thought, this came to mind because I don't know if you saw this, but like 2 months ago, there was this video out of Vegas where there's this bright object that crashed in someone's backyard. The cops saw it, and these people called the police and were like, there's these 9-foot creatures in my backyard. And so I was just thinking, like, would it be hilarious if they're like, we want to play football? You got to field the team, or we're going to eat you. So that was kind of the inspiration. But I thought it'd be fun to chat about it. So I'll let you go first, since I've clearly thought about this more, unless you want me to.
No, I can go first. That's fair. Well, give me the benefit of the doubt. So I think for quarterback, I'm going to start. Maybe we'll do the same position at the same time. Is that good?
Okay, sure. Yeah.
So I think for quarterback, if we're talking aliens are here, we need a guy who can just ball out, doesn't need to know any plays, just make something happen. I'm not talking about Johnny Manziel. I'm going to take peak Michael Vick on the Falcons. Okay. Like I'm talking Madden 2K7 cover. I think that's when he was on that.
Okay. Yeah.
That's who I'm taking as the QB because I feel like he gives the best balance of deep passer, accurate at the time, pretty good quarterback, also rusher. So kind of a fun answer there. I don't know if it's the correct one, but it's a fun one. So who's your quarterback?
No correct one. I mean, I think you just don't go with the obvious guys, right? Like I think I told you, like, don't go with Brady or Manning. There's no time to study for the test. If those guys had like 40 hours to review for this and prepare, they'd be optimal choices, but they don't. Yep. So I kind of came up with like 3 criteria that I was looking for in my players. One would be like least amount of fudges given. I'm not cursing. There's parents out there, I know, with their kids. Just like confidence, right? The ability to make a mistake and then immediately rebound. You don't get in your own head. I guess mental toughness would be another way to put that. Second one would be physical toughness. So guys who can play through injury. You don't need like season-long durability because this is just one game. Guys you don't want to tackle, that kind of thing, because these aliens are probably going to be stronger than us. And then the third one would be adaptability. So like guys who can adjust on the fly, like Vic. I think that's a great choice because you want guys who can like play that backyard style of football where if everything breaks down, you have a way out of it. So my guy's obviously Favre. No surprise there. Obviously, I collect him, so it's kind of like a homer pick. But, in terms of toughness, like the guy played through all kinds of rib injuries, played like after his dad died and threw 4 touchdowns. He was always like making plays just off the cuff, kind of like Rodgers does. But I have to go with Favre. He's just that like tough, gritty backyard type of quarterback.
Well, especially if we can get him a good team around him. I mean, he's just going to launch it.
Yeah, that's true. And then he'll throw picks, right? That was like number one is he'll throw picks, but he doesn't care. He'll come back and just chuck it the next play too.
Oh, for sure. So,
running back, who's going to be between?
Running back is a good one. I was going back and forth in my head. I think I'm going to go with a recent guy that was on my mind, and it's Mr. Bo Jackson. Because we don't need him for a full career. We don't need him for a full season. But in terms of pure athleticism, run people over faster than them as well, I think I would go Bo Jackson for my running back.
That's a good one. Unlimited athleticism right there, right? I'm going to go with Marshawn just because, like, the dude is tough as nails. Like, when you think of best plays from the past 20 years, that Saints run, that run against the Saints in the wild card game, I think, when they were sub 500, just tearing down the field, carrying everyone with him. I mean, who better to run through a brick wall than Marshawn? I feel like he's like the optimal pick here. I mean, he's probably not the best running back of the past 15 years, but you just need tough guys. This is one and done here.
And backyard football, I think he fits that pretty well.
That's true. All right, receiver. Who you got?
So I went really back and forth on this one. I think there's a lot of options. I don't think it's Jerry Rice. I think he's a great receiver, but I don't think to me it's Jerry Rice. I'm going to go with Randy Moss, and I'm pretty adamant about that one. I think there's a few others that are really, really good, but I think Randy Moss, because if I have Michael Vick and he is just launching balls, or again, if it's even Favre as the quarterback and he's launching balls, there's no one else I can think of who's better at those 50-50. I mean, there's a couple of guys that are close, but I think Moss would be my pick there for receiver.
Yeah, I think I said this too, which is like Moss at his peak to me is better than Rice at his peak. Like Rice has that longevity, which is really impressive. But in terms of like athletic profile, my ball mentality, kind of what you're talking about, where to go up and get it, it's hard to beat that. I would go with Calvin Johnson, mainly because Moss would not quite pass my physically tough category. Not a guy who's going to go over the middle. Calvin, big build, similar kind of skill set in terms of having that downfield prowess as well as being able to go up and get it. So, and he survived for many years on bad teams, like sub 500 teams, so he doesn't need a whole lot of help to succeed.
That was my second pick. Well, he get nailed across the middle a lot. I remember that, and that's led to a lot of injuries. But in this game, that's good that he can do that.
Yeah, he has to do it. We have nobody else. So.
And it's to save the planet, man.
Yeah,
and Detroit. We're saving Detroit. That's the big thing here. We're saving Detroit.
Saving Detroit. That's right.
So tight end's a tough one for me. I think I would. There's one guy I would say, but I'm going to get a little more creative here. I think I'm going to go with Tony Gonzalez. I think he's just super flexible. He's super good in terms of blocking and catching, and he's kind of the first guy to do that. Another guy that came to mind was like obviously Rob Gronkowski, which maybe you'll pick him. I think that's what the first answer would be for me, and then Antonio Gates. But I think I like Tony Gonzalez. I think he's just so experienced, and if you took him at peak, I think he's just. I guess I'll put it this way. I don't know what that guy would do in today's NFL. I don't know what his stats would look like. It'd be obscene because his numbers, if you look up career-wise, are just insane. So that'd be my pick, I think.
That's a good one. I mean, I think it's at one point I was like Gronk's greatest tight end of all time, but I think I've come to kind of respect Gonzalez has a lock on that. Now, Gronk at his peak, it's kind of like the Moss Rice thing. I think Gronk at his peak, and he's who I'd pick. In terms of physicality, like he was probably the biggest matchup nightmare in his peak. I mean, you couldn't triple cover him. I mean, there's that video of him against the former Redskins running down the field, and they're like grabbing his ankles like a bunch of school kids, trying to bring him down. And he's a great blocker to boot, so you have to factor that in. He's physical. Kelsey, he's going to give you more athleticism probably, but we need tough. Like, we need big and strong. And Kelsey's not quite there.
Yeah, that was my thought as well with him. Just a great catcher, great pass catcher, but I'm not sure about the getting beat up as much. We'll have to see. I mean, he's had longevity as well, but
Sure.
Obviously great player. So defense, this to me was a tricky one. It's like, do you go, I would imagine these are like captains and the rest of the team is filled out appropriately.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to go with Ray Lewis because I think he can come into any roster and just dominate and be a leader and not really give a crap, to put it frank. I think he would be a good one. If I was going cornerback, and I hope I'm not stealing yours, I would probably take a guy I have to say maybe Charles Woodson or something. Just, again, a guy who just doesn't care. They're going to come in. They have the mentality. They're the best guy on the field. I think those are really good in this kind of roster. Who's your people for
that's a good one. I think if you're picking a defensive anchor, you've got to go pass rusher, middle linebacker, or shutdown corner, right? Those are the cornerstones of a defense anyway. So since you went middle linebacker, I'm going to go with the Minister of Defense, Reggie White, as my pass rusher and my captain. He had 198 sacks in his career, 2 behind Bruce Smith, but played 3 fewer seasons, 1 Defensive Player of the Year, twice in the NFL. I mean, he was just an outstanding player. He was a great run blocker too. Run stuffer too. So he was my guy. I think he's going to be the one who's going to take down the aliens for us. So and you should know, you're a Packers fan, so I'm preaching.
I know. You had a way, I mean, Ray Lewis is great, but I think you had a way better answer there. Every time you say an answer, I'm like, oh, I should have, but it's just for fun. But
I studied harder for this than you did. So
yeah, there you go. I'd be curious what others think. If you guys want to, draft this for the heck of it and tag us, feel free. I think we'd both enjoy seeing that.
Definitely.
So we'll kick this over now to cards and collecting, which obviously we just talked about players, but I'd love to hear from your side of things. Obviously, I know you have a love for 90s. I'd love if you could give a little bit of background how you got into 90s cards, and then maybe during, as we talk here, keep in mind and maybe explain 90s cards for dummies a little bit. Like myself, I'm a 90s dummy. I don't know very much about it. So I'd love to hear kind of a little more about your journey, and then any tips here that, as you got started, maybe you wish you had done that somebody can learn from if they're listening.
Sure. Yeah, no. So I think it's easier to go back to when I first started, which was a few years ago, same as everybody, pandemic era. One of my friends from when I was younger, we collected baseball cards. He was already into it around 2018, got me back into it. But my foray into it was in 2020. So it was 2020 products like Burrow, Herbert, Tua. I was opening wax. I was trying to collect modern stuff. And then I just eventually figured out that was, after too many dollars spent, a losing proposition to try to collect the nice cards. I mean, they're overprinted, they're overvalued. And then ripping wax was a black hole as well. I briefly did a YouTube channel where I was opening new products and stuff like that. And I did a ROI on it, and it was negative 93% for a year. It was, so as you can imagine, it doesn't leave a whole lot of card disposable income for singles and stuff. So about a little over a year ago, I kind of divested myself of most of the ultra modern stuff and had a nice cash inflow. And so I was like, why did I actually get back into cards? And part of it was to trigger nostalgia, right? And to kind of rediscover some of these sets that I actually did collect as a kid. And that was what really pushed me onto this path of 90s stuff. And so kind of interweaving tips or tricks for new collectors. The first thing I did was I went on tcdb.com, which is tradingcarddatabase.com, started looking through all the sets from 96 to 99 just like looking at the visuals of the base sets, checking out the inserts, checking out the parallels, seeing what was numbered, what wasn't, reading blowout threads about sort of like top sets, top parallels, top inserts from that time. So I spent about like 2 to 3 weeks just trying to like learn about it, because what I had done with the ultra modern stuff was buy in too quickly and bought a bunch. We've all done it, right? We've bought a bunch of stuff that we ended up selling like 2 weeks later because we like it, just to scratch that itch. So I wanted to avoid that this time around. So I familiarized myself with the sets first. And then I kind of decided like, who do I want to go? Like, who do I want to collect? How do I want to get into 90s cards? Because I could just go out and just buy a bunch of guys I liked as a kid, and I would have this maybe cool collection, but it wouldn't really have much of a vision to it. It wouldn't have like a streamlined approach. So I decided at that time that I was going to try to build the team sets of the Patriots from 97 to 99 for the main stuff: PMGs, essential credentials, rubies, platinum medallions, 24 karat gold, super rays, that kind of stuff. And so I'm still working on that at this point. I'm about halfway through it, I would say. Out of maybe 120 cards, I've got, maybe 55 ish, something like that. So I'm still working through it. And then as I went through doing the pad sets, I was like, okay, well, these don't come up all the time, right? So you can't just go on and buy them all the time. So I've got to find players to collect as well. And so that's when I branched off into Favre and Corey Dillon, a little bit of Eddie George. But the main thing for me was getting acquainted with the sets, and really like looking at other people's pages was a big deal. 90s group chats have been immensely helpful. Finding pages of people who collect. That would be one of my tips, is like, if you're in modern space and your feed is breaking influencers and just quick flips, that kind of stuff, go on to like Austin's page or my page and look at who we're following, and look at some of our followers and check out their pages. Because you and I are following a lot of the same people, and so like that's going to give you a variety of pages to pick from. Find what you like, and then one of the best things I did recently was go through and unfollow a ton of those influencer pages, because they were just kind of clogging up my feed. Like, I did not need 20 vlogs about the national, and like just throwing cash on the table. So I was getting tired of that. That was a huge like stress relief to just not have that on my feed all the time. And then in the spring, when that rolled around, being a baseball collector as a kid, I was like, well, I should at least think about, 90s baseball, right? And which is dangerous. That's a huge expansion. Like, I promise I'm never going to do basketball, just because it's so obscenely expensive at this point to get like the nicer stuff of even lower level guys, like fringe Hall of Famers. It's really expensive. But yeah, so I got into the 90s baseball realm and picked a few players to kind of focus on. And fortunately, because there's a lot of overlap with the sets for football, I generally knew like what sets were coveted, what to go for, what price ranges you have to kind of figure out, because it's not the same as for football. But that's sort of been it in a nutshell. It seems like a lot longer than over a year, just because of how much I've accumulated in that time period. And like you, I like grading. So like, I like getting subs in. I like to have one at PSA all the time, kind of going through, having like 20 there, it comes back, you send another 20 off. It's just grading and showcasing are two of my favorite parts of the hobby.
That's awesome. It's freaky how similar our experience was. And I didn't actually realize you've only been doing the 90s. You said like for about a little over a year.
Yeah, it was last summer.
Wow. Yeah. So same for me. I was literally looking at my page today. It's like, which is funny. If you want to look back on my page ever, it was after this. It's so funny because I'm like the stereotypical, like, here's the modern cards, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And then get to the point where, oh, Austin discovered there's football cards out there. Okay. And then you kind of get up, and then you get to now where I'm at, where it's like, I feel like I finally like you. And it's, again, like I mentioned, crazy how similar our story is, where you find that niche in that space you actually really, really like. and then you hook onto it, and like the rest is history, kind of almost in this sense.
Yeah. The thing is, it's like if you do, I think there is a way to do and collect ultra modern cards. I think people do it, right? But it is also really easy to get sucked into that hype machine. It's really hard to buy these young QBs for the prices they're at and just say, I'm just going to store them, because I mean, 99% of the time they're going to decrease in value. And some people are like, well, I don't care if my collection goes to zero. But it's like if you spent $5,000 on a card, you don't want it to be 1,500 in like 3 months, right? So I think it's just the culture around the ultra modern, and again, not a blanket statement by any stretch, but the culture around like the QB flipping and stars and other prospects and other sports has gotten out of hand, to the point where I worry for new collectors who come in and that's what they see, and that's what they think collecting is. I like that you're making content that's not like that, and I hope that it can grow and that newcomers can readily see it.
I like to, and kind of where you're hinting, and you already mentioned one thing that I wanted to touch on as well, the finding people to follow that have cards that you find interesting and you would love to aspire to acquire cards like this. Like I know when I hit that, like let's say again, I found the niche, I knew what I wanted to find, and kind of what you're hinting at here, it's so dang hard to find those collectors that actually have the cards you like and you want to follow, because it's not like for Instagram, for instance, it's not like it has a really good search feature to say, I want to find a Brett Favre collector, right? It doesn't really work like that. So I found myself kind of like, I think you already mentioned, I would find a page I really like and then look at who they also follow. And then, like you said, you kind of get that network of, oh, here's a guy who collects Michael Vick. Here's a guy who collects, insert player name here. And then you kind of can break yourself out of that funnel it sucks you into, like you said, where it's, you see the, a lot of the modern stuff. And like you said, the thing that always gets me, and I don't know if your experience was the same, but it like seemed like a no brainer, just buy the guys who are playing, whatever. It's not that I don't like the players anymore. That's not why I don't buy them. It's the fact of how much is printed. Like I didn't realize that until I started collecting rare and scarce cards that there's only 99 copies of, there's only 25 copies of. And then you look at like a Joe Burrow color prism, and it's like there's 2,000 graded of this orange disco alone. It's like Brett Favre, like Rare Parallel does not have even 1/20th of that. Like it's obscene to me. And that's kind of what always steered me clear. Now I realize what kind of logically I tell myself why that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I'm with you. That's a great point, which is that, like, for instance, at one point I had like a Joe Burrow Contenders card. I was like, this is really cool. Contenders is the big set, And then you realize you go on eBay and there's like 50 Joe Burrow Contenders cards of different varieties, right? Like, yeah, it's numbered to 99, but there's also one numbered to 49 and one to 25 and one to 10. And there's a bunch that aren't numbered. Like it gets overwhelming. I remember in 2021 when Mac Jones was a rookie, so I'm a Patriots fan, I was like thinking about picking up some of his stuff, which I didn't, but there was when XR came out, I don't know if you're familiar with XR.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah. So in the 2021 release, there was over 90 one-of-ones of Mac Jones just in that product alone.
Wow.
So if you like, and I know that product is kind of like known for its one-of-ones, but still, like, I mean, how many Manning one-of-ones are there, right? Like maybe like 50, I don't know. And so like, it's not even one product has more than the total of Manning. It's just crazy. So.
No, it's a good perspective to put. And that's like you said, why too, these different eras are so intriguing and neat to me. Like you've mentioned already, and we'll kind of circle back to that maybe. So you mentioned going for the team sets for these specific, I recognize them as very iconic 90s rare and scarce parallels. You mentioned like the Super Rave, maybe, platinum medallions. I'm just thinking of like these kind of things where what's interesting about those sets and what you're collecting, it's like there's just a base card, or there's just like the medallions have a gold, and there's a platinum. And then, yeah, there is a masterpiece one-of-one in some of these sets, but it's really neat to know there isn't all of these other options sitting out there available. And I've noticed, and I'd love to hear your take on this too, like as I've progressed, I really don't like when I own a card and there's one sitting on eBay for that I could just go buy one right now. I hate that. I've noticed that's a big thing for me, cards that really stick and I want to hold on to, for the foreseeable future, hopefully as long as you and I do collect. I want cards that are not actively available at any point. Do you find yourself in that same mindset?
Yeah, to a degree. I mean, I think it is cool to have something that's not readily available, especially if it comes up like you've been looking for, years,
Mm-hmm.
and you haven't found it, and then it pops up, you get it. But yeah, it depends on, what it's numbered to. I admit, like, there's going to be some times where you have something numbered to 50 or 25, and one does come up, and but it's really about the amount. And of course, I want things that are a lot, rarer, that people haven't seen before. That's why I like the card ladder feature. The sales feature goes back in time, to, I don't even know how, 2008 maybe. But you can see like whether there have been public sales of that card or not, and so you can kind of see like, wow, this card's never actually publicly sold. Assuming that feature is completely accurate. I know sometimes it misses sales, but for the most part, it's accurate, and you can tell, wow, like, I see this card, holy crap, it hasn't sold in like 8 years, 10 years, or whatever it may be. And so that is kind of what gets me, rather than it being on eBay. I'm like, wow, it's been so long. You only see this every so often.
So let me ask you this: you're putting together these sets. There's obviously, I'm sure, many cards on your hit list that when they pop up, you're going to want to be all over them. This is a question for me because I struggle with this one. Is, let's say that card pops up that you really do want, but let's say it's out of your price range, or it's going to auction and you don't even know how to gauge what to bid at. How do you go about doing that in terms of adding to your collection, but also being smart financially, so you don't, you know, we can't spend all of our money on 2 cards if we're trying to get 30, right? It doesn't make sense. So
Right.
how do you decide what you're willing to pay for things that, let's say, might not pop up for 2, 3, 4 more years? How do you decide that?
Right. So I think there's a couple ways. Well, the first one, thankfully for the Patriots in the 90s, they don't have anybody that's really expensive. Drew Bledsoe, he's somewhat pricey, but he's not in the Favre, Marino, Elway, Steve Young range. You can get his stuff pretty reasonably priced. Curtis Martin was only there for 1997. Well, he was there before 97, but for my purposes, 97, and then a couple products in 98. And his stuff, it should be more expensive. Curtis Martin's a whole other story. He's too good to be as cheapy as he is. But so for me, I don't mind like overpaying a little bit for some of these guys. Like, for instance, last night I paid a lot more for a Ruby's Robert Edwards than probably anybody should pay for a Robert Edwards. He played there for 1 year, But if I don't have a reference point, like if that card is not sold, I think the best way to do it is to kind of look for similar players in the set. So, like, if there's a Curtis Martin or something that I need, maybe I would look at like Corey Dillon or Jerome Bettis or maybe even Marshall Faulk, to kind of give myself a range of where I should be, because you have to do that with a lot of these cards since there are no real sales. And then also, looking at, like, for essential credentials, looking at what similarly numbered cards in the set, so like if something's at a 20, irrespective of who the player is, maybe there's a guy who's at a 15 or 25 that's in the same ballpark, and that kind of gives you an idea of where you want to be.
That makes sense. That's a really good way to look at doing it. And I wonder too, I wanted to ask you this. So as you're hunting these cards and these players, how did you hone in on those sets that you already mentioned? How did you know? I know you mentioned that the trading card database was a good way to go about it. Or do you feel yourself driven a lot by, let's say, what you see other people have, or is it a lot more driven by the design and, let's say, what kind of players are in it? Like, how did you decide you wanted to do rubies, you wanted to do rave? Like, how did that come about, besides just learning about the sets first?
Right. Well, so actually, interestingly enough, when I was a kid, I put together the full base sets for baseball of Metal Universe.
Okay.
So like I knew what PMGs were because I collected those base sets. Same with the Skybox EX, the 2000s and the 2001s, and maybe the Century. But like, so I put together a lot of those base sets. I wasn't buying the parallels, the expensive parallels back then. But obviously I have binders here from childhood that have those sets in them, the Ultra too. So like platinum medallions. So a lot of those were sets that I had collected for baseball. and had not realized, like, at the time when I was a kid, about what parallels were, what numbered cards were. And I was just looking for like cool inserts and stuff like that, or like with metal, in the background, they'd be like robots picking up guys by the head. So that was cool to me as a kid, so that was definitely part of it. And then certainly when you see that other people like it, like, I think, every collector will tell you that we're influenced by what others do to some degree, whether we consciously know it or not. So part of that for me was kind of blending the two, and seeing, like, I don't want to overpay for things that aren't coveted, because I could probably get them for a lot cheaper. That was like, at least when I was first starting out, like kind of knowing what people pay for, what they don't. But as I've gone on, I've certainly expanded into other sets, lesser known sets, etc., because I know that there's a little bit of like PMG overload right now. So
You
I've,
also got to keep the mail days coming. If you don't find anything for a while, maybe you got to find another set.
yeah, exactly. And that's kind of the reason for the expansion into baseball, which is like, you've got it's like a whole new journey that you're starting, to go down, because you know these sets, but now you're getting exposure to more cards, more players, that kind of thing.
That totally makes sense. So I'm going to shift this over. I'm going to pull up a visual here. I know I saw, well, I'll put it this way. A couple weeks ago on Instagram, there was an auction going on that had a lot of fake precious metal gem greens. I think they were all greens. I know you had posted about like a warning for people to stay away from them. What I would love to learn more about is this specific card we see in front of us, which is this Joey Galloway. And I remember seeing this one and I was like, first of all, I saw you post this. I was like, well, how does he know they're fake? Whatever. And then I saw there was two cards with the same serial number that had went up for auction. So I'd love to hear if you could touch on, this card, what the story was of what happened here. And again, the reason I ask this is because if we're talking about 90s, it's impossible to not bring up the PMG. And, for myself, as I'm stepping backwards, I love this set, but I've always been concerned about fakes, and they seem super, super common. So that's why I wanted to ask about this right here.
Sure. Yeah. So here you've got the side by side of two Galloways, same serial number there. The greens in football, for those uninitiated, are the first 15 of the 150 print run, as opposed to basketball where it's 10. This is actually posted by Mitten State Collector, who's a Ben Wallace collector on Instagram. He had both of these on his story. And around that time, I was looking at some of these auctions for, so there's Patriots cards up, and I had heard and read about fakes on blowout threads. I mean, as far back as 2012, 14, that time frame. Back in 2005, when Fleer declared bankruptcy, they had a huge auction, and they auctioned off not just cards and memorabilia, but it's like credenzas and desks and office equipment. And there's a list, like a huge list of everything they auctioned off. And some of those things they auctioned off were uncut sheets of precious metal gems. And so over time, people have cut some of the sheets up and used aftermarket stamps. So they're authentic cards in the sense that they were created by Fleer, but they've been stamped by counterfeiters who are seeking to profit. By no means, and I should have probably issued this disclaimer at the beginning, by no means am I an expert in this, but I take a keen interest in it. Roger Maris, who's a blowout user, he goes by 90s Wax on Instagram, is kind of like the godfather of this stuff. So I learned a lot from his threads about it. And then once you start to pick up some of the tells on the numbering, it becomes pretty evident, when something is fake. Now we'll get to the Owens in a minute, but I do, for the purposes of this Galloway, it's pretty easy if you see them side by side here together. You've got the left one is the real one, and then the right one's the fake one. You can see the zero there. On the right is not considerably, it is wider though, I think, even to the naked eye, without measuring. You can see the zero on the left is narrower there, vertically speaking. The one in the middle there, you can see on the right, the little hook at the top, it's almost like it's pointing west. versus on the left where it almost looks like it's pointing southwest. And so usually the ones on the fakes have that sort of direction of the little serif there going west. And then the fives, you can tell the five on the right is almost like taller and narrower versus the one on the left, which is wider. And then the kerning between the numbers, or the spacing between the numbers, is different. Like on the right, it looks like there's a bigger gap between the 0 and 1 and the 1 and the 5 than there is on the left. And of course, stamps are never perfect, but and it is obviously easier when you're comparing two that are exactly, and it's the same serial, right? You know, there's not two of them, but PWCC had both of these up, and there's a big outcry about it, and understandably so, because the greens are seen as a grail for a lot of players, and so to have some fakes out there is rather unsettling. And now I'm sure that there are some that maybe I thought were fake that weren't, and some that I said were not that are. But for the most part, I would say to someone who's uninitiated, you've got to vet these through multiple channels, whether that's asking around, whether that's reading blowout threads. I wouldn't say assume they're fake, but I also wouldn't say assume they're real either. I think it's best to just do your research. And if you do have hesitation about buying these, they're not cheap. I mean, they're, even lower end players go well over $1,000, and then good players in that $4,000, $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 range. So if you're thinking about ponying up for one, do your research. And if you're unsure, it can't hurt to stay away. I'm not telling you should stay away, but it's an option. If you're cautious or timid, park your money somewhere else, so that you don't have to worry about this. Now, I will say, if you are buying a card like this, I probably wouldn't buy it raw. Not only do you have issues with stamps, but you could have issues with trimming or other alterations. So if it's slabbed, I would say it's probably a little bit safer. But you optimally would want a PSA slab over a Beckett slab. It looks like most of the fake serials are in Beckett slabs. Now, there have been a few in PSA slabs that I've noticed that I actually did flag for PSA, sent them to them, and they confirmed it. So they are confirmed fakes. They deactivated the certs on at least 4 that I sent them, so including one of my own. But the good thing is, if you have bought this card in a PSA holder and you were not the one who submitted it, you have the ability to take advantage of their authenticity guarantee and submit it to them, and they will reimburse you for the card. Now, I don't know if that's like a 1-for-1, like dollar for dollar type of thing, or whether you agree on some kind of value, but there is a remedial measure that you can take with PSA, whereas with Beckett, I don't know that that's true.
And I know there's always contention amongst folks of what the best grading companies, you hear that all the time. People say, I prefer PSA, I prefer BGS. The one thing I will say here that I think is non-arguable is that it's impressive that PSA does stand by that, because I know I've seen with these auctions, to me, just as a person who's watching along, not participating, I've noticed a lot of the onus goes on to the grading company, right? These companies who auction this might say, well, the grading company put them in the slab, right? But the thing is, if you're holding a Beckett slab that is the fake, or you happen to buy one, unfortunately, I don't know what your course of recourse is to get money back. I think you're kind of stuck, aren't you? Basically, if you happen to purchase these, and I think that's why it's so important to have this discussion, understand these.
Yeah, I don't know of anybody who's had success getting their money back from Beckett. Now, one of my buddies, he got a Jaguars, one of these that was in a Beckett slab off PWCC. And after much hair pulling, they did reimburse him for it. And I think issued probably refunds to other collectors who submitted some kind of claim with them. So I do think when you're an auction house, maybe not eBay, eBay's so big, but if you were a specialty or niche auction house, I think there is some kind of responsibility to have a second layer of authenticity, just because it's it's basically like laundering a slab, right? If you're just not even vetting it, you're just putting it up for auction, especially if these people are in the card industry and they know that there are fakes of this particular set that run rampant. There should be some additional layer of scrutiny, I think, within the companies to, identify these types of issues.
I appreciate you sharing all this. I find this conversation very interesting because I as a person who maybe again came in new a few years ago, I would not have known about this at all, right? If I came in with a lot of money, maybe, you start bidding on these. So I think it's very helpful to learn this. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I wish I had like taken an interest in it sooner, really, because the greens have been selling like in volumes for weeks now, months now. And so that sort of like, it became a little bit suspicious in that if they're so rare, why are there so many selling, and then you look at it and you're just like, oh, wow, there's a lot of these that have, oh, wow, there's two Joe Galloways, or whatever it may be.
Oh wow, same serial number. What are the chances of that?
Yeah, that's great. I got two of them. Yeah.
Awesome. So I'll kick it over. You gave another one, I think a different topic, but similar example here is this Terrell Owens. It's a really old
Yeah.
SBC card here.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt you there. This one is interesting. About 30 minutes before we started talking, MK Sports Cards messaged me about this one because I had posted it. That serial to me looks very similar. And again, the lighting is not very good on it, which could be part of it. The serial, like the width of the zeros and the six, they look similar to some of the counterfeit stamps, but I have greater questions now because he mentioned, that looks like an old label. And so I just looked it up not long ago, and it's graded in May 1999, which, to my knowledge, there were no fakes at that point. So, maybe I should recant my prior statement that this is necessarily a fake. I don't want people to get that idea, but I do think that at the very least, it creates some question of the validity of the card, right? Like, I mean, we have to rectify that there are two types of serials, if that's true, because I did find another Owens green online that had a 013 stamp, and it looked like it looked like the right stamp, like the numbers all looked correct. Whereas this just doesn't look that way to me. Now like maybe they did have another stamping system. I have never heard that. I've reached out to 90s Wax about it, but haven't heard anything from him. So if I do hear something about this, I will post it. But if you're interested in this card, just, I guess, buyer beware. I don't know.
Well, I suppose it's kind of like you said already, do your secondary research. Don't assume the slab is going to protect this. Don't assume the auction house is going to protect this. Maybe ask people who really, sounds like you said there's examples of folks out there who are very knowledgeable in this space. And I'd assume somebody who's bidding on this is aware there's fake, so they could hopefully do their due diligence here before bidding.
Yeah, I would think so. Though you'd be surprised how people throw money around when they get in without knowing what they're bidding on, So yeah, I hope so. I'd be interested because this is definitely a use case that's sort of a head scratcher because it's not like any of the modern ones. Most of the ones you see that are in these Beckett slabs or PSA slabs are 2014 or later graded, because you can check the cert, see when it was graded. Most of them 2014 or later for football. And you're still seeing these uncut sheets being auctioned off by these major auction houses, which just perpetuates the cycle of fraudulent activity, unfortunately. So that's kind of why I say, use caution when buying greens, because like, unfortunately, the market's getting inundated with fakes. And so just something to keep in mind. I don't want to dissuade anyone from buying greens, but it's just something to be mindful of.
Can never hurt to do the research and to be made more aware. I think that's the biggest thing, sharing the information.
That's right.
Perfect. So now that we got the serious, knowledge sharing out of the way, I think we fun to jump over to the Mount Rushmore. Are you ready to share your top 4 favorite cards in your collection?
Let's do it. Yeah. So as a caveat, these are not quite like, if I had to rank 1 through 50 Northwoods cards collector style, these wouldn't be my top 4 necessarily, but I kind of chose one from each each like PC avenue. So first one's Curtis Martin Rubies. This kind of represents my pursuit of the team sets for the Patriots, 97 to 99. I think this is, some people will probably say the green PMG is Curtis Martin's best Patriots card, where he's actually in a Patriots uniform. This is my favorite. I just am not a huge green PMG fan. Serial numbers aside, I'm just not a huge fan of those anyway. But so the Rubies is probably my favorite Patriots card I own. And this was a good example of, Brett always, he always says like make your bat signal post, right? Or whatever on your story, and like post what you're looking for. And that's how this card came to me. Somebody reached out like last December, and it was like, not even a card account. He was like, "Hey man, I have this," and sent it to me. I was like, "Damn!" And this was a card where there were no this one public sale, and it was of this PSA 8 from a few years ago. So this was the only one at the time that had been graded by PSA, and I think there was one by Beckett. So it was a tough card to find, and to me was sort of like really established that it's sort of like the anchor of the Patriots collection, because Martin's probably the best player on the Patriots from that time frame, other than maybe like Ty Law or something. So that's why I chose that to sort of represent it. And I think after 24 karat gold, the Rubies is my favorite 90s parallel. So that's why I went with that one.
So a few questions on that. So this obviously 97 here. What are these numbered out of? Is it 50?
That's correct. Yeah,
okay,
they're
50. And then how many? I don't know the answers. How many years do they do Star Rubies? When did it start? Was it always Skybox Premium that put these out, or?
Yeah, 96 was unnumbered.
Okay.
And then in 97, they had out of 50 Skybox Premium. 98 also Skybox Premium out of 50, except for rookies who are out of 35. So that's why Manning's out of 35. And then 99 Skybox Premium, they drop to 30. And that's the, I call it the, like, if you use an ultra modern effect, like the purple stars, that like from Optic, it's like that star effect. Those are out of 30, except there is for rookies, there's an out of 30, and then there's a variation out of 15. So rookies in 99 have two. So Jordan actually posted the Edgerrin James out of 15, which is like the harder one to come by. And then in 2000, you also have Ruby said, I think 2000's the last year. And so that's out of 50 as well. And so I believe, someone correct me if I'm wrong, I don't own any from 2000, but that's sort of the run there. And then after 2000, I think is when the Fleer empire sort of changed hands. Marvel put Fleer up for bankruptcy and was bought by another company. And then Fleer were eventually years later bought by Upper Deck after the bankruptcy. And so that's why I think you see kind of a decline, in my opinion, and probably other collectors' opinions, in quality and in vision and design after 2000.
That's interesting. And funny enough, I own one for Peyton from 2000. It's like an insert, something Skylines. I forget the first name, but it's an insert. But there is, I know when I was looking up, it's funny, I already asked you this question, what should I pay for something like this when it was brought up to me, because there's no sales. Mm-hmm. I found another set that, again, I can't remember what the manufacturer is, still Skybox something, but there's like two different sets that had Rubies in 2000. So I do know that. But beyond that, I couldn't tell you much more.
Yeah, that's it really does it's funny because the prices correlate. It's like a bell curve, because 96 is cheap, 2000 is relatively cheap, and then the 97, 98 is really when it peaks, I would say. So that's the Rubies discussion there. That was my pick for that.
Yeah, those are insane. I saw recently too, somebody had posted a Barry Sanders. I was just like, oh my gosh, they look crazy, especially if you see a video and them move back and forth a little bit. The pattern's just like unbeatable, it seems like.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. It's crazy. And the Sanders and Rice stuff is just so obscenely expensive at this point in time.
Yeah. So I always stick to our favorite teams and favorite players.
That's right. Don't fall into that trap.
Yeah. So what's the second card here? And just obviously a reminder, I think I forgot on the first card, if you just could say the year and everything too, so anyone listening without the visual knows. I think you did on the first card, but I forgot to remind you.
So the second card, 1998 Skybox EX 2001. This is a Pedro Martinez Essential Credentials Future, which is the magenta reddish toned card. The now is the yellow. For baseball, basketball, and football, these were made for each of the three sports, but they all add up to different numbers. And so on the now, which is the yellow card, whatever the number of the card in the set is, that's how many it's numbered out of. And then the future is 101 minus that number. So basically your now and your future add up to 101. And so this Pedro Martinez is numbered out of 62. The now is numbered out of 39. But the reason I chose this one is it's my favorite in my baseball collection. It was really actually kind of the first one I added. Weirdly enough, I went big when I jumped into baseball. It was like I saw an auction closing on Saturday. I was like just searching for baseball cards, and I was like, oh wow, that looks nice, and then just kind of, how sometimes it's not a card you're looking for, but then you find yourself bidding, and then you're yeah, and then your competitive spirit's like, this guy's not going to win it. I'm not going to let it. You just keep going up. Now, it's kind of what happened. But the guy messaged me afterwards and was very nice and actually said, hey, man, you got a great deal. I turned down offers much higher than this on it. I'm glad he honored the sale. That was important. And, for me, I'm from Boston, so I'm a big Red Sox fan as well. So this was his first year in Boston in 98. He's in his spring training year. It's kind of one of his, in my opinion, like best of his top 5, probably Red Sox cards, at least in the 90s. So that was why I chose this one. It's the colors really work. And I like this card better than the now, because I just think the Red Sox uniform here looks better with this color scheme than it does with like the yellow greenish. So I'm happy I ended up with this one.
Yeah, kind of a nice color match there with the background color.
Yeah, exactly.
This third card, as we mentioned at the beginning, as I creep back into the 90s, now this third card I'm very, 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 very jealous of. So what do we have here?
All right, so now this one's from my Favre collection here. This is a 1999 Metal Universe, Brett Favre Precious Metal Gems, PSA 8. I forgot to mention that Pedro is also PSA 8, as was the Curtis Martin, if you're listening. The Favre is numbered out of 50. This was the third year of numbered Precious Metal Gems. This one I think is an interesting story and is a good lesson to maybe newer collectors or those who are unfamiliar with maybe the capabilities of Card Ladder. So this is a free plug for Card Ladder if they're listening. There is a showcase feature on there. I upload all my cards onto Card Ladder after I've scanned them in. And like you said earlier with Instagram, you don't have the ability to really just like type in Brett Favre cards and then things pop up. With the showcase feature on Card Ladder, you have that ability to search by player name, and then it'll bring up all the cards that are in collections on Card Ladder. And if the person has, so that's where I found this. And if the person has an Instagram account linked, you can just click the message button and it'll take you to their Instagram account. So I saw this on there, and this is Nonsense Name Cards is the guy who had this. He's got a lot of really nice stuff. If you don't follow him, check him out. But I just messaged him. I was like, hey, you've got a lot of really cool Favre stuff. I saw these on Card Ladder. Is there anything you'd be, willing to move? And he said, like, there may be these one or two. I'm not moving these, But I said, okay, well, I really want that 99 PMG, and so I couldn't stop thinking about it. And then I messaged him again, and he said something effective. I guess I'd take an offer on it. And it turns out he actually had 2 of it. So he was willing to part with one of them. And so easiest negotiation I've ever had. I literally just, hey, would you take this for it? And he said, yes. So I probably could have gotten it for cheaper, and he probably could have gotten more out of me. But it seemed like, it seemed like a good resolution. We both walked away happy. So it was, I have no problem paying what I did for it, So that was how I got this one. I don't think that I would have been able to land it in the same way, like if it had been on auction or if it had been on someone's like a big seller story, I'm sure there would have been a lot of competing offers. So this is a good, don't be afraid to message people, even if just to say, hey, I really like your collection. Man, I'd love to have one of those someday. And then just kind of pick their brain or talk to them about it. And eventually, maybe they come around to selling that particular card or something else that you're interested in, or they can point you in that direction.
That's a great advice. It's funny. I get that sometimes, too, where people reach out and it's like, well, I don't really want to sell it, but it's nice because you can kind of keep a running tally of like, okay, this person has dibs on this one. This person, if I ever sell, it's kind of like, sounds like that's kind of what happened here. That's really sweet.
Yeah. So that was, it really came together. That was like one of my favorite, I guess, ways in which I've obtained a nice card.
Yeah, using that feature. That's really neat. I'll have to start using that because I have not used it yet. But that seems like a best spot to store card photos too. I use like the set registry now for PSA, but I don't even actually try to complete sets at this moment that are on there. It's just I happen to have it's a nice spot to store the card photos and look back on sometimes.
I use Flickr, but you can also, you also use Card Ladder. At least gives you, like, you can input your own values and it kind of gives you a collection value if you want to know.
Oh, awesome. So what's the fourth card here? What do we got?
All right, last card here comes from the Corey Dillon PC. This is actually a recent pickup. Another PSA 8. This is a 1998 Flair Brilliance Corey Dillon 24 karat gold. Flair Brilliance, a one and done product, just 1998, 1999 for baseball. They're all numbered to 24. And this is my favorite parallel from the 90s. I sort of started with Corey Dillon. I was going to get into Eddie George and picked up some of his inserts because I was a big Eddie George fan when I was a kid and teenager. And so I realized, though, how competitive Eddie collectors are, and there's a lot of them. And so I was like, starting from scratch is kind of tough. And plus, I don't really want to compete with all these people for these cards. So I kind of pivoted a little bit. And I was like, nobody collects Corey Dillon. I'm like, why? I get he was on a lot of bad Bengals teams, but he helped us win a Super Bowl, ran for 16 touchdowns that year. So I'm referring to the Patriots for those of you listening. So he I feel like he's probably maybe eventually a Hall of Famer. Like, they're Athletic. I know you read it. The Athletic posted an article about him not long ago and sort of his credentials and why he deserves to be in. But he had some insane numbers. So anyway, I started picking up his cards really only in March, and I've just accumulated a ton quickly. And given the prices are not crazy like they are for like Barry Sanders, et cetera. So it's been fun being able to get some of his better cards for palatable prices. And this one actually came from another IG buddy, BSU Beavers 06. Ryan, he's a Ricky Waters collector. But he had this, and again, I just made him an offer and he accepted it. And then I showed it to him when it got graded, and he was like, damn, I shouldn't have sold that to you, but I thought this would be a nice touch. I actually was going to pick a different Dillon card, but I think this one is sort of the highlight of the collection. I'm a sucker for these, as you can tell, the 99 PMG, just the gold backdrop. It really shines in the light. And these scans don't even do it justice, even they are kind of higher resolution. The shine is, you have to see it in person.
That's amazing. And I was going to ask, so you had mentioned when you saw the grade, he was like, oh crap. So I have to imagine an 8 across the board on all of these are very strong grades on every single one of these sets, right?
Yeah, I would say so. I would say, honestly, probably the rubies and the PMG are prone to just chipping, edge wear. So 8 is a strong grade. You don't see many 10s, and there are 10s. The credentials 98. The issues there are usually like surface scratches or some kind of imperfections there. Since they're made of acetate, the corners and edges are a little bit stronger, but you do get some chipping on the back. So 8's, strong there. And then 24 karat, there's all kinds of surface dents and scratches and stuff. So 8 is kind of like an ultra modern 10 on some of these sets.
That's amazing. Awesome. Thanks so much. This has been super fun. We'll end here with a fast 5 if you're good with it. It's kind of the first thing that comes to mind. So first of all, you have to collect a basketball player. I know you said you don't. Who's it going to be?
So with the idea that I want to be in on those late 90s cards, I'd probably go with Olajuwon or Barkley.
Okay.
I love that. I love that Rockets jersey, and that's part of the appeal. And I love Charles Barkley. So I might go one of those. I think Olajuwon's a little bit underappreciated, but again, those guys way too expensive for me.
So second question here, if you could poach one modern quarterback who's currently playing and throw them back on the 90s Patriots to win a couple Super Bowls before Tom Brady gets there, who would it be? You got to
Are,
poach a guy currently playing.
are we assuming that whoever I poach will win Super Bowls, or do I have to pick them based on their prowess to win Super Bowls?
Prowess.
Okay, then Mahomes. I mean,
Oh, that's easy. Yeah.
He's won 2 already. I don't know that there's anybody more suitable. Now, in terms of like favorite, like Burrow would probably be my guy. He's my favorite non-Patriot, I would say. So either one. But if I really am just going for winning, then Mahomes.
Awesome. Makes sense. And then what's your favorite year of cards? I know you had a whole run there between 97 and 99. We just talked about what would be your favorite year of cards overall?
I mean, 98. No, I mean, there's no question. Like, it's not even close. 98.
What does it for you? That PMG the PMG we just saw was 99, right?
Right. But you've got the PMG that has like the cityscape backgrounds, right?
Okay.
You've got the rubies, which is the Manning rookie ruby. You've got the 24 karat gold. You've got the essential credentials like the Pedro I just showed you. You've got the best year of ultra platinum medallion. You've got Skybox under super rave. So like it's and the Bowman's best atomic refractor, the cracked ice versions. It's really hard to pick against 98.
Yeah, that's a good answer. I don't think anyone said that one. It's always people always say 97, or then if they're fan of more modern cards, they say something after 2000. Right. And then another one. What is your favorite hobby? Maybe unique hobby outside of cards. Anything people should know about you?
Cooking and like running, lifting type of stuff. Yeah. So trying to stay healthy. I have 2 kids, so it's like it's so easy to just fall into the trap of like I'm just gonna have pizza again, And so
I have no kids and I do that, man.
Yeah. That's okay. You'll have one soon, and then you'll be eating more pizza.
There you go. What's your favorite dish to cook? If it's like a go-to, this doesn't count as a question, but it's a follow-up. What's your favorite dish to cook?
Either crab cakes or probably like a good carbonara.
My wife and I's favorite as well. We do homemade carbonara with what's the meat called?
Guanciale.
Guanciale, yeah. The pork.
Yeah. The problem with carbonara is though you can't have it left over. It tastes disgusting.
My wife would fight you on that. She thinks it's so good.
The egg taste is just weird the next day. I don't know.
Oh, it is better fresh. Okay, then fifth and final question. If hypothetically you have to bring back one 90s parallel in today's sets, and we're not speaking about print runs, anything like that, but strictly from if I could just have a chance to collect one of these parallels again with modern cards, which one would you pick? Kind of like a Fleer Retro type question, right? Because Fleer Retro did that in 2012, but let's say hypothetically next year they go about doing it.
Like my default would be like none, because I want to preserve the special, how special it is, right? I don't want these like ultra modern flippers flipping it but let's just say in a vacuum, I think it would be cool to bring back, 98 PMGs would be interesting because you have like cities have changed so much in 25 years, like you've got like these more desolate places now that are built up and gentrified. So it'd be kind of weird to see how they shift over the last 25 years. So maybe 98 PMGs.
No, that's awesome. I agree with your logic there too. It's kind of funny. It's like, it's almost like, here's my logic. I would hate for them to make a card right now that I really love the look of, and I'd be fighting for it for the next 20 years because everyone's just going crazy with it.
Yeah. Or there are too many of them, right?
Yeah.
It's, I think 90s collectors are kind of like a little bit get off my lawn in the sense they're like, these are our cards. You can't have them collectors,
No, I respect it. That's why it's so fun to follow along and learn from all of you guys, whether it's basketball or baseball or football.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. Well, Zan, I really appreciate that. It was super fun, hopefully informative to everyone who listened, and also awesome collection. I love that Mount Rushmore. That was super fun.
Thanks, man. Yeah. And if anybody ever wants to chat or has any questions about anything, please just message me. I'm always down to talk about cards.
Awesome. Thanks so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks, man. Have a good one.